Hello there, and welcome back to another Gear Talk. It's been a while. By a while, I mean just 2 weeks, as we always come back every Thursday for a Gear Talk, every other week at 5 o'clock. It's nice to have you all with me. I actually am going to do something new today. So this is one I haven't done before. I've wanted to, I've just never had the chance to do it. So, if you look behind me, I've got some Cobalt Blue. We're talking about some Gears-related COG stuff, but it's kind of special, because if you don't know about Gears of War, there's a lot of fans of the series. There's a lot of people who put a lot of time and effort into their craft, you could say. Like for me, making my videos. For other content creators, like when you have Daz or Blood or the others I've ever mentioned. Binks is another example. Like, we're all content creators. We all like to make something and contribute to the fandom. I also have a friend by the name of Bossman Jumpers, who also is a fan of Gears of War, and he does his craft in a different way. He is an author of sorts. He's created his own story in the Gears of War universe, which I want to talk about today. It fits perfectly well into the Gabe's Convoy discussion series, because it happens during the time of Tactics, which is perfect, because when I found this, I already started the Gabe's Convoy discussion series, so this just fell in line perfectly with everything I was looking at doing. I was already planning on doing fan stories, and lo and behold, the first one I begin fits perfectly into everything I wanted to do. So, the story we're looking at today is Gears of War Desolation. Now, it is important to note a few things for this. Number one, it's important to note that this is a fan story. End of the day, this is not canon to the story. Jumpers make sure to put this in, and I'll be linking all of his stuff below. In the story, he has the beginning for the author's notes, which we're going to jump into and talk about too. We're going to talk about his notes for everything and also chapter 1. So there's a lot more of the story he's working on. At the time of this recording, we're up to 3 chapters, but it is important to state that this is a very, very long story he's crafting, but he has the first 3. He's done a story originally for it, but he's just revamping everything. I'm getting off track, though. It's important to state that the story, it's a fandom project. This doesn't have anything to do with the Coalition. This isn't a story that you're going to find on the wiki for. Here is everything that's canonically in. It does have canon events that are talked about in the story. It has characters that are probably going to mention canon things. There are areas that are canon, but the events and characters that we are following are not canon in the story. It's important to say I'm a very heavy canon buff, a very heavy true to the story buff, so I just want to get that out there. But anyway, let's talk a bit about the author's notes before we jump in. So for the author's notes of things, Bossman Jumpers is what you're going to find on Twitter. Again, link on everything below. But Jumpers XI is going to be the author of this story that we have. He's a friend of mine. I've talked to him a while. I've wanted to do his story, and he said, yeah, go ahead and do it. That's perfectly fine. We've been talking back and forth about it, and I'm happy that I can jump in and do it with his permission. I thank you kindly, Bossman. I'm going to do the best I can for this, just to cover your notes for everything that we're looking into, and also for looking at Chapter 1. Okay, now that I've got all the Bossman riding out of the way, let's get into this. So, for the notes, we take a look at things and how he talks about how he wants the perspective of the story to go. I'm not going to be going by the play-by-play for an author's notes thing. No, we're just going to discuss them. Chapter 1, we will dive into it and talk about some of the situations and characters that we meet. It is just an introduction, though, so don't expect anything too heavy. But for the notes itself, Jumpers does talk about in his author's notes how he wants to aim at the story being more aimed at the survival aspect, or very dark and gritty and horrific that we find ourselves in the first game. In the original Gears of War, for those that have played it and understand that have played all the games, you will know that Gears of War, the first game, has a very different tone and setting than the other games. For instance, with 2, it's very much set how humanity has a fighting chance. We're taking the fight onto their home field, and we're for the first time ever on the offensive. You'll see in 3, it's more of a journey that takes place to go and find Marcus's father. 4 is more of just understanding the enemy within a night's time frame. And 5 is just doing its own thing. But you'll notice that in 1, it's very dark, it's very gritty, especially the beginning while everyone's dead in a prison. You notice as you go through the game in 1, it is very survival. You are making your way through this planet. The first time you're introduced to anything in Gears. And while you're going through, things can be very quiet at times, very eerie. Because you know for a fact, you as a human, you don't have a large stake in this fight as a single individual. A lot of humans have died before you, and a lot more are going to die. You're very much going through, doing the mission, but still, like, keeping onto the back roads and everything, and, like, staying out of sight from the locusts. 2 onwards is not like that, because if you come head-to-head with the locust, you're fighting them. It's not like we need to divert ourselves and stay away from this. No, it's a fight. But in 1, it's very survival-esque, and that's what I really liked about Jumper's story, especially for the first chapter when you introduce and see how they move through the environment. It very is ominous to like how 1 is portrayed. And I very much like that, how Jumpers did that. Let's go into chapter 1 quick and just talk about that a little bit. How should we do this? I've never done like a fan story before. Like, I've done it for the comics. I've gone like through beginning events to end, but how do I do it for this? Like, that's a good question. Like, this is new terrain. This is a new thing we're doing here. So, I guess I'll just kind of treat it as like how I did the comics, just like from beginning to end. Let's just go through it, no notes, and just talk about some things, and yeah, just see where we land. We'll probably start off this story by just addressing the characters. Now, halfway through the first chapter, you get pretty much a heads up on all 4 of the characters, but let's just lay them out now just to get them out of the way. So, we get introduced to the character that we're mostly following, who is Mark. Now, Mark is in charge of his squad. We know that Mark is in charge because it's also stated that the original commanding officer of the squad, he was originally killed by a locust, and Mark was placed in charge. So, Mark is the one that is leading everybody. Next up, we also have the character of Axel, who's pretty much like his Dom. Now, I say that because it is stated later on that Axel and Mark do know each other. They've been fighting since E-Day, and the events of this story take place when the first hammers are going to be coming down. Again, this is like towards the time of tactics. So this is roughly around 1 AE we're at. So these two have known each other for about a year. Like, they're very well acquainted at this point. They've been fighting next to each other since E-Day. So these two are the ones we know pretty well. The 2 other characters that we're given are Matthew, and I'm pretty sure we're going for Eiffel is his name. I'm not good with reading and just pronouncing. It could be Eiffel, but I think it's Eiffel, like the Eiffel Tower, like Eiffel. I believe that's Eiffel, who, by what we see, he's more of the engineering type, because we see him come across, I believe it's not a centaur. No, it is a centaur, I believe. No, a pack horse. There we go. I'm smart. He comes across a pack horse, and he takes a look at it, and he can see, like, I could probably get this working if you give me a few days. Everyone knows during the hammer strikes, there were no days, so they decide not to do that. And the other character we have is Lucas, and we have all 4 of these characters, basically our squaddies that we're going to have in this story. As far as I know, there could be more main characters introduced, but as of chapter 1, these are the 4 that we have, and we are just covering chapter 1 today. So, we have all 4 of them who start off the story. We start off in the town, and a lot of people would know this one, of Aldair. Now, if you don't know Aldair, because you haven't been paying attention to the Gears Convoy discussion series, we have covered many areas so far. We even had a video on all of Vaskar. We have covered a lot of places. Aldair is the hometown of Michaela. Aldair is also one of the areas inside near Jacinto, but it is not on the plateau, so unfortunately, Aldair at one point is getting overrun. And not only that, but little spoiler, but not really, because we've talked about the series pretty heavily throughout all the years of Gear Talks. Aldair is going to get hit by a hammer strike, and it's not pretty. We do know that a lot of people survive, or at least a good amount do. For instance, Michaela and her crew, they all survive. Her stranded group, they make it out. And as far as the chapter goes, we never get the hammer strike, but we do know that this is where they're located at the moment, and they are trying to evacuate. Mark makes it known to the group, and the group already knows this, but he reassures them of, hey, so you know, we have to get out of here. Like, our job is to evacuate, but we also have to leave. The hammer strikes are coming. And this is while they're traveling through the town, pretty much getting to their, I don't know if it's their evac point they're heading to, or if it's their next area that they're headed, but they are originally meeting up, taking a few moments to get a breather near a fountain in the city, and this is when he gives the news of, like, we need to keep going. As they continue forward, they do come over to a fueling depot. They really stock up and get prepared for the journey they have to take. And by journey, I mean, like, they have to get to where they're getting evac or where they are heading for their next portion of the mission. And while this is going on, while they're getting they're getting packed up. I was about to say fuel. There's no fuel. It is stated in the story, Jumpers writes it really well, that the place is pretty much picked clean. Anything that's there for resources are gone. So they pack up with whatever they have left that they can carry, and they head on out. While they're going, that's when Mark talks about how him and Axel were originally, they knew each other on E-Day, because I believe it was Lucas or Eiffel that asked, like, you two are pretty chummy, you must already know each other. Because all four of these characters we learn are, like, not that old. They haven't been in the military long. You have some people who joined during the Pendulum Wars, which were 3 out of 4 of these characters, but at the very end of it, before E-Day began. So they, like, enlisted a little bit before the 6 weeks of peace, and then E-Day hit. We learned that Lucas is the one that actually joined after the Locust came out because he's very young. He's still in his teens. So we learned that everyone here is very young, early 20s and one in their teens. And Axel and Marcus, not Marcus. Marcus was around for a while. No, Mark. Mark was around. They were there, and they fought during E-Day, but they survived. A lot of people got wiped out, but they lived, and they've been together since. And the other two that have joined are new to the squad. They have not met each other before. So Eiffel and Lucas are still new to one another, along with Axel and Mark. So as they continue forward and they're talking, it comes to the point where Mark tells the group after they leave the depot, they're walking through the city, and he says, we're being watched. So, in other words, there's probably like sniper patrols out, or there's probably locusts that are in the distance that know that they are there. So it's brought up that they should probably take the back roads or go throughout the back portion and alleyways of the city in order to make their way to the end so they're not in the open and killed. Again, the story very much focuses on having this as a survival kind of setting. Like, the city is pretty much destroyed. Jumpers does a very good job of writing, this town is screwed and destroyed before the hammer even hit. When they come to the fountain, it's implied that it's blood that's in the fountain because they state that the fountain itself has, like, a crimson liquid inside of it. So, like, probably someone bled out and died in the fountain. You also have it where they're walking through a field that's near the fountain that's, by what they can tell, very blood-soaked, riddled with a few bodies of COG and civilians and a few locusts here and there, so there was a battle. Like, they are going through this town and evacuating the people that are left, because remember, this is before the hammer strikes. Like, stranded aren't a thing yet. Stranded happened right after the hammer strikes because they are stranded to pretty much be killed by the hammers. But these people that are left, they're trying to get out of there at least to be like, hey, hammer's coming, least we can do is get you out of the city. That's the least we can do at this point. And a lot of COG, even in the canon of the story, were sent out to get people evacuated where you could. They got as many people as they could out, and after they did that, the people that were left, they were like, we don't really have a choice, like, sorry. And that goes for soldiers too. If the soldiers could not make it back by the designated time, they were hit with the hammer too. Like, the Hammer of Dawn strikes sucked a lot. It did not matter who you were. Unless you had really high connections and could get evacuated ASAP, if you were a normal person, you got luck of the draw, you could get into town quick enough. That's how it went. So I really like how Jumpers covers this, because he makes it seem like, yeah, this town has been destroyed, desolated, it's bad. But there are still people here. The Locusts may be patrolling the town. There are still people in hiding that need to get out of here. They're getting hit by the hammers. And unfortunately, for Mark's crew, if they don't also get out, they are also going to get hit by the hammers. I say crew, I meant squad. But yeah, if they don't get out, they're dead. Ending the first chapter, while they're going through the alleyways and back roads, they do come across, at the end, a very giant sinkhole. Now, this is a very large one by how it's stated that goes deep into the earth. This is probably one of the main ones where the Locust originally popped out. Because during E-Day, there were a lot of giant sinkholes that appeared, and that's where the Locust came out. It wasn't just the small ones we see in the games. There were giant, enormous ones where just the armies just spewed out. So I'm going to assume this is one of them that they came across. It's probably been used very much already. Again, it's been a year, so it's probably not flooding locusts out left and right, but it probably is a main connection to the Hollow. And that is where we end the first chapter, where pretty much Marty's like, hey, careful not to fall in. That's pretty much how it goes. So yeah, that is the first chapter and a little bit more of the author for this video. How I'm going to do this is I want to cover the story. It's a very interesting story. I like how it goes. I like the flow. This is one of the more better fan stories I've seen. This one along with Barricade's story, which I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but Barricade also has a very good one I want to cover someday. I got his permission a long time ago, but that was years. I need to double check with him on that. But that's going to do it for this one. I think I want to keep going with this. I might do more than just like 2 chapters at a time. I might wait for a lot of chapters to come out. Maybe do like 3 to 4 chapters at a time, because by how Jumpers made it sound, he wants to go into like the 50s for chapters. So this could be a long story, so I don't want to go one by one or else we'll be here forever. Nothing against Jumpers, I'm fine with that, but you know, for people watching, like, I'd like if I could just have like a good amount, like good chunks into each one. I think that would flow really well instead of just break. I think it would work pretty well just doing like 3 or 4 at a time. So, I want to thank you all for watching. I want to thank everyone for making this possible, and thank the patrons for making this possible. I am going to be actually, while you're seeing this, this is the last video that's going to be up before I am headed out of town, out of my state altogether, and I'm on vacation for about a week. So I hope this tides you over. I wanted to do like a more simple one, talk about a discussion like we did the comics, because it flows well, it's pretty good, and this is a fan story, so images there's not a lot of, so editing, I might just make this just a quick run, unless Jumpers has some art I can use. I don't know. I'll talk to him and see how it goes. Jumpers, if you're seeing this in the future, I love you to death, and thank you very much for letting me cover this. I would love to cover more. Yeah, and we'll see what happens with more chapters coming out. I love y'all to death. Later.